50 years ago, amid a ferocious blizzard in Iowa, a young college student vanished on her way home, disappearing without a trace, leaving her family in despair. Authorities at the time concluded it was merely an accident in the storm, but with no body, no witnesses, and scant clues to investigate, the case quickly faded into obscurity. Yet, through all those years, her father never stopped searching, clinging to the faint hope that his daughter wasn't forgotten. Then one day, when a young reporter stumbled upon an old file, she uncovered a detail overlooked for nearly half a century, a detail significant enough to upend the entire case and shock the state of Iowa. Before we dive into this chilling story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you love reopened cases like this, don't forget to hit subscribe to follow the next episodes. Winter of 1975, Iowa faced its first major blizzard. The sprawling plains around Cedar Rapids were whipped white by wind, the howl of gusts through power lines and wire fences, plunging the town into the paralysis of cold. On College Hill, the university library closed early. The night janitor recalled that Anna Klein, a freshman, was the last to leave. She carried a small bag, wore a gray wool scarf, and said she was heading to Lisbon, where her parents were waiting. The 19-year-old, quiet and meticulous in her note-taking, worked at the library to save for the next semester. Leaving campus, she stopped at a roadside diner, ordering hot coffee and fries. The owner remembered she paid with a $5 bill and left the receipt on the table, as if she'd come back for it. Outside, the wind grew fiercer, snow falling thickly. A gas station worker nearby saw a girl in a green wool coat step out of her car, standing still in the snow for a few seconds, gazing toward the distant road fading into the haze. Then she got back in, turned on her headlights, and drove off. 30 miles away in Lisbon, the Klein family's small wooden house glowed with light. Mrs. Klein prepared dinner, a plate of cold meat pie cooling on the table. The wall clock ticked past 9, the wind whistling through the door's cracks, prompting her to peer into the yard, but she saw only the blur of snow. The phone rang. She rushed to answer, but there was only static on the line. She called the school, the library, her daughter's friends. No one knew where Anna was. Near 11, Frank Klein bundled up and went out, driving into the night, his headlights cutting through the dense snow along Highway 30. He drove slowly, straining to see through the white void by the roadside, spotting only swirling clouds of snow dust. No tire tracks, no other lights. He stopped at a gas station, asked the night attendant. Everyone shook their heads. After midnight, Frank returned there again, gripping a payphone, his hands trembling from cold as he dialed the police. Outside, snow kept falling, flakes glinting in the dim yellow streetlight, melting on contact with the ground. He sat in his car for a long while, engine running, windows fogging white, and only when 2 patrol cars emerged from the haze did he feel his hands shake from cold and fear. A young officer jotted down a few lines, promising a search team by morning. As they left, Frank stayed in his car, watching the red taillights dissolve into the snow, then silently staring at the misty fields ahead. That was the last time anyone saw him cry. The next morning, the storm cleared. The ground froze, winds still gusting across the silent plains. News of a student missing in the blizzard spread through the region. The local station broadcast, Lynn County Police are coordinating a search for Anna Klein, 19, a University of Iowa student. Sheriff Harold Whitaker was assigned to lead the effort. He arrived at the scene before sunrise with 2 patrol cars and a truck carrying equipment. Volunteers from Mount Vernon, Lisbon, and Cedar Rapids showed up. Within hours, nearly 50 people were present, armed with shovels, flashlights, and even tracking dogs. Whitaker divided them into 4 groups, each covering a section along Highway 30, expanding the search radius to 10 miles. He spoke in a dry tone, "We follow the wind's direction, move in lines, report any signs immediately." Radios crackled amid the whistling wind. Snow blanketed everything, leaving only the orange dots of reflective vests moving slowly against the white. Frank joined a volunteer group. He wore thick gloves, but still felt the chill, each step heavy as if pulled down by frozen mud beneath the snow. He said nothing, only scanned around, desperate to spot anything that might belong to his daughter. Near noon, faint sunlight pierced the thick clouds. A shout rang out from the northern group, "Over here!" Everyone rushed over. In the snow, a small object glinted, a gray wool glove, nearly frozen stiff. A few meters away, a soft-cover notebook lay face down, its edges stuck together, writing blurred by dampness. But a few lines of class schedules and a final note were legible. "Call Mom before heading home." No one spoke. The wind howled, flinging tiny snow grains into their faces. An officer bagged the notebook as the search team prepared to return to the main road. A piece of paper flipped across the ice, carried by the wind. Frank bent to pick it up, a coffee receipt from the roadside diner. Faded but showing the date and a final line. "Hot coffee, $1.10. He gripped the paper tightly, cold spreading from his fingers to his heart. Sheriff Whitaker approached, glanced at the evidence, and signaled for it to be collected. He said, "Mark it, bag it." But no one saw him mark the spot. By early afternoon, the wind strengthened. Reporters and a small TV crew arrived to film. A young journalist asked Whitaker, "Do you think this could be a crime?" He shrugged, his eyes as cold as the gray sky above. "Maybe she just got lost in the storm. In Iowa, that happens often. Don't make a big deal out of it." His words aired on the evening news, convincing many that the case was just an accident. Meanwhile, the Klein family stood at the search's edge. Mrs. Klein clutched a photo of her daughter, questioning passers-by. Frank stayed silent, watching the moving line of searchers, his hand gripping a soaked wool cap. As dusk fell, Whitaker called off the search until morning. Flashlights dimmed, leaving only the faint yellow glow of patrol car lights reflecting off the ice. Frank didn't leave. He walked along the tree line, his flashlight trembling as it swept through the snow, his eyes red from the cold wind. By nightfall, everyone else had gone. Only Frank remained, with a few small red markers dotting the field, marking searched areas. The wind rose again, erasing footprints. In the absolute silence of the white plains, Frank stared at the flags tilting in the breeze, each stake deep into the snow like a faint sign of hope. Those red flags along the white field, the only sign that someone was still being sought. 2 days later, as the wind grew less bitter and snow paused, a farmer named Ed Larkin called the Lynn County Police Hotline. His voice was hoarse from cold and fear. "I saw strange tire tracks near the Mount Vernon Bridge, like a car went off the road." The tip was relayed to the search team. By mid-morning, 4 patrol cars and a tow truck reached the reported spot, a narrow road along a creek, 5 miles from the previous day's search endpoint. The sky was overcast, thick fog blanketing the creek bed. Snow had hardened into patches, revealing 2 deep tire tracks running straight to the ditch's edge. Whitaker signaled to cordon off the area. Reflective tape was strung around, snapping against metal stakes in the wind. Officers shoveled snow, uncovering the front of a faded blue Ford Pinto. When the snow was cleared, the car was fully visible. Its hood was slightly dented, paint chipped from ice, but no major crash damage. The door was unlocked. An officer opened it. The hinge screeched in the cold air. Inside, the driver's seat was empty, radio off, but the headlights were still on, casting a weak glow onto the ice ahead. A paper coffee cup lay tipped on the floor, its contents frozen into a thin layer. On the passenger seat, Anna's bag sat neatly, half-soaked, containing a few books and a broken pencil. Whitaker leaned in, checked the dashboard clock, stuck at 9:12. He nodded silently, then ordered the car towed to the station. An officer suggested taking more photos of the scene, but Whitaker said, "No need. We know what happened." No one argued. A crane arrived, hooking cables to the car. As it was pulled from the ditch, a grating sound echoed, startling crows from nearby trees. Beneath the churned snow, dark water seeped out, but no signs of a struggle or blood were found. The report noted, "Blue Ford Pinto, Lisbon plates, no signs of foul play. Driver's seat empty, headlights on." Vehicle slid off-road in bad weather. An older forensic tech, part of the team, frowned. How does a car slide like that with lights still on and the door open? Whitaker turned, his voice icy. Maybe she got out to find help and got lost. He walked off, stomping into the snow, leaving deep boot prints no one photographed. When the car reached the police impound lot, Frank Klein was there, watching from a distance. He recognized his daughter's faded blue car, but wasn't allowed near it. An officer stopped him. "Sorry, Mr. Klein, restricted area." Frank stared through the fence, eyes sunken, breath turning to white vapor. He asked, "Where is she?" No one answered. A search team member quietly handed him a wet scarf, found caught in grass near the ditch. He took it, hands trembling, saying nothing. That afternoon, reporters swarmed. They photographed the car, recorded Whitaker's statement. Standing in the snowy scene, his coat caked with ice, he spoke briefly. Initial observations suggest a minor accident. The car likely slid into the ditch due to ice. No evidence of criminal activity. A reporter asked, "Have you found the driver?" He replied, "Not yet, but she likely left the car, maybe walked to find shelter." His calm, cold tone convinced many. That evening, the news showed the covered car, captioned "Police believe missing student may be stranded in blizzard." In Lisbon, Mrs. Klein sat before the TV, clutching her daughter's photo. Frank didn't watch. He sat in the dark living room, a desk lamp illuminating the now stiff scarf, smelling faintly of wet wool and gasoline. He reread a copied report a young officer had slipped him. 4 lines, ending with "vehicle slid into ditch." That night, Frank returned to the scene. The sky was clear, snow frozen into a thick layer, reflecting gray moonlight. He parked by the ditch, touched the icy road, feeling its chill. His headlights cast a faint glow on the frozen mud. He muttered, voice hoarse like the wind, "If you slid, who turned off the heater?" No one answered. Only the wind whistling through the trees and the faint flicker of a distant streetlight, dying in the cold night. The next morning, the sky was gray and bitterly cold. Ice thickened on the ground, covering any remaining traces around the car's discovery site. In the small Lynn County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Harold Whitaker sat behind an old wooden desk, filling out the first lines of the official report. Outside, technicians removed the tarp from the blue Ford Pinto, towed from the scene. Mud streaked its body, one headlight still glowing faintly until the battery died. No one wore protective gear or logged notes when opening the car. An officer nearby asked, "Need more photos, sir?" Whitaker didn't look up, saying curtly, "No. Yesterday's scene shots are enough," but the file contained only 8 photos, all blurry and poorly framed. None captured the second set of tire tracks or the surrounding area fully. A young officer, McKay, who took the photos, later said he planned to take more wide shots, but Whitaker approached, patted his shoulder, and said, "Clear out before the snow covers it again. Don't let the car sit there overnight, wasting time." McKay recalled Whitaker's tone wasn't commanding, but a cold reminder. This needed to end quickly. In the report, Whitaker wrote in black ink, "No sign of foul play, vehicle appears to have slid off icy road, weather conditions consistent with accident." At the end, he underlined heavily, "No further investigation required." That line became the basis for closing the case. When typed, the clerk tried asking about the driver's seat condition, but Whitaker waved it off. "Write it as is." No soil samples were taken. No measurements from road to car. No comparison of the rear tire tracks. The Ford Pinto was moved to the evidence lot that afternoon. The tow driver logged, "Vehicle delivered 1542, not sealed, no signature." When the lot's door opened, cold air poured out. A corner held other seized cars, all dust-covered. Anna's Pinto was parked against the wall, unlabeled, no case number. A lot worker asked, "Need to seal it?" His colleague shrugged. "No, it's just a missing person case." The metal door closed, its clang echoing in the empty space. That afternoon, Whitaker visited the duty room, signed the shift log, and left early. He told the lieutenant, taking over, that he had to stop by the local radio station to provide an official update. The evening broadcast aired his recorded statement. After thoroughly reviewing the scene, we found no signs indicating foul play. It's likely the victim simply got lost in the harsh weather conditions. The investigation will continue if new evidence emerges. His voice was steady, smooth, without a stumble. His delivery reassured listeners as if everything had been handled by the book. But in the Lisbon house, that trust was gone. Frank Klein read the copied report sent to him, just 2 pages, mostly describing weather conditions. He tapped the table, mentally repeating the dry words, pausing at the final line. Case temporarily closed pending further evidence. Mrs. Klein only stared at her daughter's photo beside her, softly shaking her head. She wasn't a reckless driver, she was terrified of blizzards. Frank folded the papers, feeling the cold from outside seep into his chest. A few days later, a reporter came to follow up. Whitaker answered curtly. "No new developments. We've considered all possibilities." He barred filming in the evidence lot and photographing the car. When the reporter requested the detailed report, he said, "The file isn't complete." Then he turned and walked away. In the office, the heater hummed, but the air was thick with the smell of gasoline and damp paper. A week later, the official report was finalized and sent to the state police office. A small note typed at the bottom read, "File stored, voluntary disappearance." No one questioned why a girl carrying books, leaving her bag and running car behind, was deemed to have left willingly. No one asked why a car in the dead of winter was cleared so hastily. The town fell silent, as if the blizzard had swept away all questions. In that report, Anna Klein's name occupied 4 lines under case closed, a dry period ending her entire presence in the legal system. In the days after the car was pulled from the ditch, the Lynn County Sheriff's Office began collecting additional statements to complete the file. But for those who knew Anna, their accounts seemed barely taken seriously. The first called in was Lisa Meyer, Anna's roommate at the University of Iowa dorms. The thin brunette, eyes swollen from sleeplessness, sat before an old wooden interrogation table. When the duty officer asked about Anna's final days, Lisa spoke softly, almost whispering. She seemed anxious, not herself. The last week before break, Anna said someone was following her. She paused, staring at her hands, then added, "A man, standing by the library parking lot." She said he stared without speaking. At first, she thought he was an older student, but on Friday evening, after her shift, she saw him there again. Lisa said Anna planned to switch shifts to avoid him, but couldn't due to upcoming exams. When her statement reached higher-ups, Whitaker jotted a brief note, vague information, unverified. He didn't send anyone to check the library's security cameras or call Lisa back. 2 days later, Samuel White, a convenience store clerk near the area, volunteered to report. He said, on the evening of December 12th, around the library's closing time, he saw a gray pickup truck parked in the back lot for a while, engine running but no one entering or exiting. "I remember because it had no rear plate," he said, and a rusty tow hitch on the back. When pressed, he confirmed seeing a man in an old police jacket circling a blue Ford, like Anna's. He just wanted to ensure he hadn't misseen. The recorded statement was stored on an internal cassette, but never transcribed into the official file. The officer logging that day, Lieutenant Frazier, later recounted that Whitaker came to the room right after he finished the report. He read it and said, "No need to include this. People imagine things in snow and dim lights. Don't complicate it." Then he took the original and slipped it into his coat pocket. When Frazier asked, "What about the copy?" Whitaker shook his head. "The file's full enough." From then on, Lisa and Samuel's statements vanished from the case records. The Klein family, rejecting the voluntary disappearance conclusion, kept asking around. Frank went to the library, showing Anna's photo to security, asking if anyone suspicious was in the lot that night. The elderly guard recalled there was a pickup parked by the fence all evening, I thought it was a maintenance workers. When Frank urged him to testify, he hesitated. I told the police, but they said no more was needed. The word silenced Frank. Days later, he and his wife met Whitaker at the station. Mrs. Klein, voice trembling, said, "If someone was following her, you have to investigate. Why not look for that truck?" Whitaker leaned back, eyes weary, and replied, "Folks, we have no solid evidence. Maybe someone just passed by. We'll keep an eye out." He glanced at a thick file, adding as if to end it, "In that weather, she likely got stuck somewhere. If there's new info, I'll let you know." But Frank knew he wouldn't. When Whitaker left, Frank mustered the courage to call the FBI office in Des Moines. He recounted everything, emphasizing the witnesses and possible stalking. The duty officer took notes, then said mechanically, "We're sorry, but this doesn't fall under federal jurisdiction. Without evidence of a crime or interstate abduction, we can't intervene." Frank pressed, "What if she was killed?" Silence hung for seconds before the reply, "Contact us with concrete evidence." The call ended with static. In the following days, Frank and friends searched around the Mount Vernon Bridge where the car was found. They found broken wood scraps and gray fabric bits, but nothing clear. He gathered them, took them to the station, and placed them on the front desk. The duty officer glanced over, shrugged. Unrelated, could be from another vehicle. He didn't take a report. Frank bagged them in plastic, brought them home, and stored them in a file drawer where they remained for decades. In the month-end summary reports, the only note on those statements was under addendum. No suspicious elements detected. Witness accounts deemed unreliable. When the typist asked whether to write investigated or ruled out, Whitaker said, "Write unnecessary, keep it short." And so, the small details that could have changed the case, the gray truck, the strange man, the staring eyes in the lot, were erased from the file, as if they never existed. By late December, Iowa faced its second major snowfall. The ground's ice thickened nearly 2 inches, swallowing the search team's painstaking markers from the past 2 weeks. The red stakes marking the search perimeter barely protruded from the new snow, tilting like lost needles. Temperatures plummeted, wind swirled over the silent fields, muffling all sound. The Lynn County Sheriff's Office issued a notice halting the search due to adverse weather conditions. The announcement aired for under 30 seconds on the radio, sandwiched between corn prices and icy roads in Des Moines. By morning, volunteer teams had left. The field tent on Highway 30 was dismantled, reflective stakes piled up. Sheriff Whitaker walked through the former command site, his boots sinking into ice, leaving prints that wind filled in minutes. He stood silently, staring toward the bridge where the car was found. Dark clouds drifted low, the cold light froze the scene like a photograph. "Nothing left to see," he told his deputy. Voice rough from the wind. "When the ice melts, maybe we'll find something." But that winter, the ice didn't melt. The press, once crowded at the scene, moved on. The Gazette's front page covered a feed mill fire. Anna Klein's story dropped to page 3, then vanished. Townsfolk talked about her for a few days, then stopped, like discussing a storm that had passed. The diner, where Anna had coffee, hung a "Pray for the Young Girl" sign, removed by the new year. Frank Klein didn't stop. He walked the road from Cedar Rapids to Lisbon each morning, when fog hung thick like smoke, carrying a map and flashlight. He marked searched areas in red pen, A for spots near the road, X for those by hidden streams. Each afternoon, he returned, boots caked with ice, face gray from cold wind. Mrs. Klein quietly boiled water, laid the scarf found near the scene on the table, smoothed its frayed fibers, and folded it carefully, as if touching her daughter. In early January, Frank visited the local radio station with flyers of Anna's photo. He asked them to rebroadcast the missing person alert. But the clerk said, "Sir, the police say the case is handled. They'll reach out with new info." Frank stood silently, left a flyer on the counter, and walked out. Wind scattered the flyers he carried. They swirled and sank into the snow. Days later, he wrote to Sheriff Whitaker, requesting the search resume when weather allowed, and to revisit the car's scene. The letter went unanswered. 2 weeks passed, then 3, then 4. At the station, the receptionist handed him a brief final report. No further action. 3 words, typed neatly, no notes, no signature. He read it repeatedly, eyes red, then folded it into his coat pocket. In town, people avoided the topic. Some said, Anna might have left willingly. Some girls get tired of school, of home, and just go. Others believed she was stranded, but that winter was too brutal for a prolonged search. Only the Kleins believed their daughter was still out there. They asked friends in Mount Vernon and Lisbon to post flyers. Each was taped with waterproof adhesive, but within days, snow buried them. One late January afternoon, Frank returned to the Mount Vernon bridge. He stood by the railing, staring at the frozen creek bed. Pale light filtered through clouds, glinting off ice in faint streaks. He heard the wind, imagining tires crunching thin ice from some memory. A passing truck stirred snow at his feet. When its sound faded, only the wind's whistle and endless emptiness remained. The next day, Whitaker submitted the final summary to the state office. He signed, clipped the file into a thick stack, and shelved it. Case number 750431. Klein, Anna, missing person. Under conclusions, the typist added routinely, no further action. The file was stored in a metal cabinet, closed with a cold metallic clank. Outside, snow fell again. New flakes covered the old, thick and white, indistinguishable. In Lisbon, the Klein house's lights stayed on late. Frank sat by the window, staring at the white yard, eyes empty. He waited for the sound of his daughter's car engine from afar, a familiar hum now only in his mind. Another blizzard came, erasing all footprints. In those cold files, Anna Klein's name was just a data point, a missing person case, hastily closed with 3 emotionless words, no further action. After the file was closed, winter dragged on like a prolonged dream. By spring, snow melted, ice broke along Mount Vernon's creek, but no one returned to the scene. Highway 30 buzzed with traffic again. Traces of the disappearance vanished with the flowing water. In the Lynn County Sheriff's storage, file 750431, Klein, Anna sat among hundreds of minor cases, car thefts, disturbances, lost documents. Each was numbered, tied with thin twine. Her name was now just a yellowed label on a folder's spine. In the summer of 1976, a new officer was tasked with organizing the file vault. Scanning the towering stack, he picked old cases for long-term storage. Anna's was among them. No one objected. Sheriff Whitaker, then in charge, signed off, stamping, inactive. The case was sent to the Regional Investigations Office in Cedar Rapids. There, only a condensed copy, 2 report pages, and 8 photos was kept. The original, per protocol, was returned to evidence storage, but the evidence log was blank. The sealed bag, with the notebook, wool glove, and coffee receipt, was gone. On the storage form, someone had crossed out retained evidence in red pen. The signing lieutenant couldn't recall seeing them. Maybe sent to the state office, he said later. But the state office had no record of receiving evidence from Lynn County. All physical traces of the disappearance vanished in transit between departments, like the girl lost in the blizzard. By 1978, Whitaker was promoted to Deputy Director of Regional Security. He left the main station, handing off old cases. At his farewell, a colleague asked, "What about that student case, closed for good?" Whitaker gave a faint smile, pouring coffee. "She probably just went somewhere. Don't let nobody cases waste the budget." That line was repeated years later, like an official end to Anna Klein's fate. The 1980s passed quietly. Search team members retired or moved away. Frank Klein kept his faded map, but added no new marks. Each winter, he sent a letter to the sheriff's office, requesting a reopened investigation. No replies came. Once, he visited with a copy of the old file. The young receptionist flipped through, saying hesitantly, "This case isn't in the active system, sir. Without new evidence, we can't do more." Frank left, walking slowly down dusty steps, where snow hadn't fallen in years. Meanwhile, the press forgot Anna's name. The Gazette's archive search for Klein returned a few lines. Missing student's car found, case under review. No updates followed. Her name faded from collective memory, replaced by new cases, new faces. In Lisbon's memory, the 1975 disappearance became a vague tale, told in winter bars. That girl probably left. In the sheriff's office, the old case wall was replaced with metal racks. Brown file boxes were resealed, labels peeling, ink fading. In April 1982, during a routine audit, the clerk noted, Case 75-0431, folder incomplete, 8 pages missing, photos faded. He stamped archive and sent it to state storage. No one reviewed it before sealing. That year, Whitaker received a 30-year service medal and moved to Iowa's Criminal Advisory Board. He appeared in papers, smiling kindly, in a pressed uniform. Asked what he was proudest of, he said, keeping the community safe. No one mentioned the 1975 disappearance. In Lisbon, Frank still tuned the radio each morning. Sometimes, when snow fell, he drove to the Mount Vernon Bridge, stopping briefly, silent. Each year, he sent another letter to the police. "Please don't forget my daughter." No replies came, but he kept sending. By the 10th letter, the receiving clerk had changed. In the 1984 summary, a note on old cases read simply, "No updates, case remains inactive." That evening, in the storage room, the clerk flipped off the light, fluorescent bulbs casting a glow over long shelves. On the 4th row, the box labeled Klein, Anna sat between 2 other old cases. Dust coated it so thickly, the date was unreadable. The voluntary disappearance paper had yellowed, its edges curled from dampness. No one touched it. No one remembered the girl lost in the 1975 snow, nor knew that in those dormant files, overlooked details awaited rediscovery. In March 1986, Iowa remained cold. In the basement of the Lynn County Sheriff's Office, where thousands of old files were stored, fluorescent bulbs cast a pale, flickering light, like shallow breaths. Officer Calvin Dorsey, newly transferred from Des Moines, was tasked with a simple job: audit all unresolved missing person cases from the 1970s. Meticulous, adept at reading faded handwriting, he jotted notes in pencil on margins. Among hundreds of twine-tied files, a dark brown folder caught his eye. The label's text was faded, but the last line was faintly visible. Klein, Anna, 1975. Dorsey pulled the file from the shelf, dust swirling thickly, the smell of damp paper and old ink hitting his nose. He spread it on the metal table, flipping through each page. The first pages were familiar: personal details, weather reports, scene summary. But at the evidence description section, something was off. The report was disjointed. Page 5 jumped to page 10. 4 pages in between were missing. Thinking it might be a filing error, he checked the appendix, but found nothing. The last line on page 5 cut off mid-sentence. Vehicle towed from scene at. Then the next page shifted to report complete. No further additions needed. Dorsey frowned. In the right corner of the new page was a bold, slanted signature, Harold Whitaker, then Deputy Director of Regional Security. Below it, a faded red circular stamp read, "Final Report. Certified." Under the typed text, he spotted a small handwritten note in blue ink, slightly tilted. "Tow, no log filed." The handwriting was distinct, softer, and rushed, likely from a clerk or field tech. Dorsey paused for a long time. Standard protocol required any missing person case with physical evidence, like a car, clothing, or personal items, to have a tow log and scene photos attached. But here, there was nothing. He flipped to the photo section. Only 8 images, as listed in the 1976 audit, all blurry, poorly framed. One showed the car's rear half, a shadowy figure in the background, resembling Whitaker. Dorsey's brow furrowed. If it was him, the lead officer was at the scene before forensics arrived, against protocol. He took the file to the main archive room and asked the supervisor. The older man, wearing thick glasses, gave an awkward smile. "I don't know." Back then, Whitaker sealed files himself. Everyone respected him. If he said it was enough, it was enough. Dorsey thanked him and left, but the silence unnerved him. That night, he stayed late, sitting in his small office, desk lamp on, reviewing every detail. In his mind, the disappearance began to take shape like an unresolved blur. The next day, he checked the state data archive for a copy to cross-reference. The copy was on microfilm. When projected, Dorsey found an extra page absent from the original, a supplemental report, clearly typed, also signed by Whitaker, titled Final Report. Its content was brief. The scene was cleared before snow covered it. No evidence needed preservation and caused bad weather. At the bottom, the familiar handwritten note reappeared, "Tau, no log filed." Dorsey photographed the frame, printed it, and returned to the old archive to check again. He noticed the Klein, Anna file had a small tear at the spine, as if the binding had been undone to remove pages. The paper there was different, newer, stiffer. Someone had replaced 4 original pages with Whitaker's supplement, likely after the case was marked inactive. That afternoon, he met Martha O'Neill, a retired clerk who worked under Whitaker in the late 70s, still visiting the office occasionally. When Dorsey asked, she thought for a moment, then said softly, "I remember a missing person case. Whitaker told me to discard some old pages, type a condensed version. He said it was to clean the file for state transfer. I followed orders. No one questioned him then." When Dorsey asked about the Tay, no log filed note, she nodded. "I didn't write that, probably a field tech, but I clearly remember Whitaker saying not to type it up." Her answer silenced Dorsey for a long while. He felt he'd touched a void in the system where truth once existed, replaced by administrative silence. Back at his desk, he flipped through the file, the dry rustle of paper echoing. Each line felt like a truncated memory. That night, alone in the dim room, with only the desk lamp's glow, Dorsey used an old photocopier to copy the entire file, front and back, including blank pages. He attached a note to the copy, backup for cross-reference. Original shows signs of tampering, 4 pages missing, replaced by supplemental report with Whitaker's signature. Handwritten note, Tay, no log filed. He sealed the copy in an envelope, wrote his name on it, and stored it in his personal file cabinet. Before turning off the light, Dorsey scanned the room. Iron racks brimmed with old files, the air thick with paper and metal smells. He knew most cases like this would never reopen, but instinct told him Anna Klein's disappearance wasn't just a forgotten name. Somewhere in those removed pages, something was deliberately hidden. From that night, Dorsey quietly kept every copy, every trace, as if he alone knew the truth had been sliced from the record. Calvin Dorsey couldn't sleep for nights after discovering the 4 missing pages. The more he reread the cold lines in the final report, the more he sensed something wasn't just a clerical error, but intentional. The handwritten Tay, no log filed, looped in his mind. Who could order a mandatory procedure skipped unless they wanted to hide something? This suspicion drove him to search beyond the system, where official records couldn't reach the press. One April afternoon, Dorsey visited the Cedar Rapids Public Library, housing microfilm of local papers spanning 3 decades. The archive room, cold and empty, hummed with an old fan in the corner. He asked the librarian, an elderly woman with silver hair and black-rimmed glasses, for the Cedar Rapids Gazette and Mount Vernon Record from December 1975. She pointed to a tall metal cabinet of round film canisters. "It's all there. Help yourself, officer." Dorsey pulled the 3rd drawer, tracing the labels, stopping at a reel marked December 1975, Vollern CX. He loaded it into the microfilm reader, switched on the light. A blue-white glow lit the small screen, black text columns scrolling by. He fast-forwarded to December 13th, one day after Anna's disappearance. At the bottom of page 3, a small headline, University of Iowa student missing in blizzard. Below was a black and white photo, a blurry scene, the dark Ford Pinto tilted in snow. At the image's edge, a figure stood a few meters from the car, arms crossed, head slightly bowed. Dorsey zoomed in. Though grainy and blurred, he recognized the police uniform, cap, medium build, shoulders slouched, Harold Whitaker's stance. He printed the frame and moved to the next page. The caption read, Sheriff Harold Whitaker, at the scene where student Anna Klein's car was found. The text stunned Dorsey. Official records stated Whitaker arrived at the scene at 8:45 a.m. on December 13th, after the family's missing report. But the caption suggested the photo was taken earlier, before the case was logged. He leaned back, sitting still. If the photo's date was accurate, Whitaker was at the scene at least half a day before the search was authorized. How did he know the location? Who informed him? And why was this detail absent from any report? Dorsey scoured other issues from that day, seeking the photographer. At the article's end, a small line photo by J.P. Caldwell. He checked the phone book and old newsroom logs. Caldwell was a Gazette photographer from 1973 to 1980, later moving to commercial printing. Dorsey noted his old address and drove there the next afternoon. The small wooden house sat on Marion's outskirts. Caldwell, now in his 60s, opened the door warily. When Dorsey showed the microfilm print, he stared long, then sighed. God, I thought those were destroyed. Dorsey asked, When did you take this? Caldwell spoke slowly. Early morning, December 12th, I was called to shoot a car slide-off in Mount Vernon. No one said it was a missing person case. When I got there, Whitaker was already there, staring at the car. I took a few shots, but when I submitted them, he came to the newsroom himself, said the photos weren't verified, asked to pull them. The editor agreed, printed a test run in the early edition, then swapped it for another, without him. Dorsey asked, Why keep the film? Caldwell gave a wry smile. Professional habit. I shot thousands of frames. No one checks them all. The next day, Dorsey returned to the library, requesting the official December 13th issue. On page 3, as Caldwell said, the photo was replaced with a snowy road shot, no figures present. The caption changed to Missing Student's Car Found Saturday Morning. No mention of Whitaker or the photo's timing. Dorsey stared at both versions, the microfilm and the printed issue, his heart pounding. The discrepancy wasn't a mistake. Someone had deliberately removed Whitaker's image from the article, someone with enough influence to sway the newsroom. His mind connected the dots, 4 pages pulled from the file, the no log filed note. And now a photo proving Whitaker was at the scene before the missing report was filed. He brought the print back, tucked it in a separate envelope with his copied file. In his work log, Dorsey wrote briefly, Evidence suggests timeline discrepancies in official report. Whitaker present at scene before search authorized. Suspected internal interference. That night, alone in the basement office, wind whistling through the door's cracks, Dorsey stared at the black and white photo taped to his desk. Whitaker's silhouette in the snow, expression unclear, but his hands in his coat pockets and calm stance exuded an odd serenity, not of someone responding to a missing report, but someone checking a known outcome. The microfilm photo became the first evidence, not of Anna Klein's case, but of the cover-up shrouding it. In that silent archive, Calvin Dorsey realized he'd touched another layer of ice, colder, thicker, cloaking the truth the system was built to protect. Nearly 48 years later, winter again blanketed Iowa in thick, blinding snow. In February 2023, in a small Des Moines Register office, investigative reporter Clara Doyle sat before her computer, its blue glow lighting her face. She was finalizing the first installment of Forgotten Iowa, a series on unsolved cases and forgotten people in the state's heart. Born in Cedar Rapids, Clara grew up hearing fragmented tales of the student who vanished in the 1975 blizzard. As a child, her mother worked at the city library, where Anna Klein had a part-time job. That story never left her, a shadow over her childhood memories. One evening, scanning the state police database, Clara typed, "Line, Anna, 1975. The result loaded slowly, a cold line. Case hash 750431, missing person, status closed. But below, something odd caught her eye, an update note, supplemental report filed, 1981. Why would a case closed for nearly 6 years have a new addition? And why was it never mentioned? Clara zoomed in, but the content was restricted. She requested access using her investigative journalist credentials. 2 days later, an automated email replied, "Access denied. Case archived. Non-public." Curiosity mixed with suspicion drove her to dig deeper. She called the Lynn County Archive office, asking for the original file. The tired voice on the line said, "Pre-1990, you'd need the paper copy, but the archive room's under renovation." The response only fueled her resolve. The next day, Clara drove over 2 hours from Des Moines to Cedar Rapids, through vast white fields. Wind whipped snow dust across her windshield, blurring the road ahead. The archive room was in the basement of the old courthouse, once a World War II jail, dimly lit, the air damp with the scent of old paper. An elderly clerk led her to a row of metal shelves, pointing to a dim corner. "Old missing person cases are over there. Search carefully. Many labels are peeling." After nearly an hour, Clara found a brown file, dust-caked, its faded label barely legible. "Klein, Anna, 1975. Opening it, she instantly noticed replaced pages. The middle ones were different, newer paper, sharper ink. At the end, Whitaker's signature stood out, with the line "Final Report." She sat on the floor, flipping through. A taped note at the back read, "File reviewed by C. Dorsey, 1986. The name stopped her. She recalled an old Iowa Law Review article, Calvin Dorsey, a former archive officer who criticized mysteriously missing pages in 1970s files. She noted his old address, then searched online from her hotel. A small entry appeared in Marion's citizen directory, Calvin E. Dorsey, retired, age 71. The next morning, Clara visited him. His small wooden house sat near a forest, its roof, snow-covered, thin smoke rising from the chimney. Dorsey answered her knock, wearing a gray sweater, eyes sharp, despite his age. When she introduced herself, he smiled faintly. "Finally, someone's asking about that case." They sat in his small living room, surrounded by old file boxes and an antique typewriter. Clara explained Forgotten Iowa and the 1981 supplement she'd found. He listened silently, then stood, went to another room, and returned with a large yellow envelope, its edges worn. "I've kept this for 37 years, he said slowly. The original Anna Klein file. Opening the envelope, Clara saw an old photocopy, cover marked "Personal Backup." C. Dorsey, 1986. Inside were 8 pages and 3 black and white photos, one showing Whitaker at the scene, the image the 1975 official paper had replaced. He recounted his findings briefly: the pulled pages, the "no log filed" note, the photo removed from print. "I sent an internal report then," he said, "but no one cared. They said I misread the timeline, just a printing error." He gave a dry, raspy laugh. "I knew they were covering up, but I had no power." Clara sat silently. She held what the police had tried to hide, not just evidence, but a link between a disappearance and decades of concealment. Before leaving, Dorsey handed her a small USB in an anti-static bag. "This has scans of the entire file. I keep the original, but you need it more." When Clara asked why he shared now, he said, "Because I want justice to exist, at least in one retold story." Back in Des Moines, Clara sent the scans to James Rourke, head of Iowa's cold case unit, whom she'd interviewed for another case. 3 days later, Rourke called, "Do you know what you've just opened?" When Clara said she only wanted to verify the truth, he replied, "Then brace yourself. This could be the longest reinvestigation the state's ever seen. That afternoon, the cold case unit issued an internal notice, re-examination requested. Case hash 750431, Anna Klein. When the reinvestigation of Anna Klein's disappearance was announced, Iowa's cold case unit formed a 5-person task force led by Detective James Rourke. In their first meeting at the Des Moines headquarters, Rourke placed 2 files on a metal table. One, the state's official archived copy from the internal database. The other, the documents Clara Doyle brought from Calvin Dorsey, scanned and reprinted. The 2 files looked identical externally, but differed in thickness. The state's had 12 pages, Dorsey's 16. 4 pages gone, Rourke said, voice low but firm. And I want to know why. The team compared every line, ink mark and typed page, spreading both files side by side under special lighting to reveal old ink. 4 discrepancies emerged immediately, not printing errors, but deliberate edits. The first was the scene response timeline. The official file stated Whitaker arrived at the scene at 8:45 a.m. on December 13, 1975, after the missing report. But Dorsey's copy had an original line on a removed page. Vehicle found at 6:10 a.m., Sheriff Whitaker at Mount Vernon site by 6:40. He was there nearly 3 hours before the search was authorized. Clara stared at the numbers, whispering, same time as the microfilm photo. The second discrepancy was the scene's location. The official file listed coordinates as ditch north of Mount Vernon Bridge, 42 degrees 02 N. But Dorsey's noted the original site as South Ditch, nearly a mile away. The team used modern satellite maps, projecting the area. The South Ditch led to a narrow farm road, concealable from the main highway. If Whitaker found the car in the south and moved it north, Rourke said, we're talking about a staged scene. The third was physical evidence. The state file listed 2 items. 1, gray wool glove. 2, handbag. But Dorsey's included 3, coffee receipt. 4, gray fabric scrap. 5, small silver chain with long brown hair. The last 2, fabric and chain, were in the evidence C3 envelope the cold case unit just found. They were never lost, Clara said, voice tight. Just removed from the list. Rourke nodded. And who had the authority to do that in 1976? Only the report's signer, Whitaker. The fourth, most serious discrepancy was the final signature. The state file had Whitaker's under final report. But Dorsey's copy showed another beside it, in different ink. Lut. R. Frazier. Frazier was the lieutenant logging the scene in 1975, who left the force in 1980 for health reasons. When the team checked the original, Frazier's signature on the official file had been razored out on the old microfilm copy. Only a torn edge remained. Rourke stood silently before the files, the lamp casting a sharp glow across his face. These 4 points, he said, aren't enough alone to prove a crime, but together, they show Whitaker was at the scene before the search team moved the car from its original site and later edited the file to erase traces. Clara sat beside, scribbling every word. In her mind, she saw the Ford Pinto tilted in snow, and the man in the old black and white photo, arms crossed, standing calmly in the scene, as if directing a stage he'd set himself. To solidify evidence, Rourke had the legal team review all Lynn County Sheriff's Office duty logs for December 12 and 13, 1975. It took nearly a week to retrieve, as data was digitized from paper. The results silenced the team. The radio log showed Whitaker's patrol car signaled at 5:58 a.m. on December 13, reporting, heading to Mount Vernon to check an abandoned vehicle. No call from the Klein family had come yet, as their missing report was logged at 7:42 a.m. Whitaker knew the car's location nearly 2 hours before anyone else. How did he know? Clara asked. Rourke didn't answer immediately. He pointed to the final note in Dorsey's copy. Tow, no log filed. His voice was slow, heavy, because he ordered the tow. That day, the cold case unit sent a preliminary report to the state attorney general's office, requesting an internal investigation into former Sheriff Harold Whitaker's conduct. A copy was sent to Clara under press access. In the conclusion, Rourke wrote, "Based on current evidence, the likelihood of file manipulation and scene interference by an authority figure is high. Initial suspect, Harold Whitaker." Reading that line, Clara felt a chill down her spine. For nearly half a century, Whitaker's name was spoken with respect. The man who kept the community safe for 30 years. Now every piece pointed to him as the one who began the cover-up of a disappearance that never found closure. That evening, in his small Des Moines office, Rourke kept the lights on late. He looked at the two files side by side on his table. Two versions of the same event. One, the official story the system chose to remember. The other, the truth fragments a man quietly preserved for nearly 40 years. Outside, snow fell lightly on the window, reflecting the cold white light. He said softly to himself, "Some cases never truly close. They just wait for the right person to reopen them." The next morning, the cold case unit issued an official statement: Harold Whitaker, first potential suspect in Anna Klein's disappearance. 2 days after Harold Whitaker was officially listed as a suspect, Iowa's state forensics team began reviewing the old evidence storage of Lynn County. The archive room, located in the basement of an old administrative building, smelled of metal, dusty paper, and machine oil. Flickering fluorescent lights illuminated rows of iron shelves, each holding dozens of aging brown boxes, their labels faded, handwritten text nearly gone. Rourke, joined by two forensic technicians, David Kellner and Rita Hall, was present. They brought the 1976 inventory list, checking each item. After 2 hours, Hall found a misplaced box labeled MISC 7577. Miscellaneous cases from 1975 to 1977, not in the official catalog. Opening it, among jumbled files was a brown envelope, edges torn, but a faint red seal remained. A slanted inscription stood out, Evidence C3, Do Not Destroy. Below, in nearly faded handwriting, Klein A., December 1975. Hall carefully gloved up and opened the envelope. Inside were two items in old nylon bags: a thin silver chain with a broken clasp and a 5 centimeters gray fabric. Scrap with fine brown hair strands, no seal tags, no case numbers, just a note in blue ink. Driver's seat, right side, collected 12/12. The date made all three exchange glances. December 12th, Rourke repeated, before the missing report. That afternoon, the envelope was resealed in a cold storage bag and sent to the Des Moines Forensic Lab. Chief Examiner Dr. Elaine Mathers, head of the state's DNA unit, took custody and logged it for analysis. Rourke watched as she opened the envelope in a static-free chamber. "We need to know the material, origin, everything on it," he said. Mathers nodded. "If there's any biological trace, even faint, we'll find it." The analysis took nearly 2 days. The fabric was examined under a spectral microscope and cross-referenced with an industrial materials database. The results silenced the room. The fabric matched the synthetic weave of felt used in Ford F-100 truck seats, 1972 to 1974 models, color, gunmetal gray. Mathers printed the report, placing it before Rourke. "This fabric isn't in a Ford Pinto's interior, but it perfectly matches F-100 seats. We can pinpoint the source." Rourke immediately ordered the administrative team to search statewide vehicle registrations from 1975. Within an hour, results appeared. Harold Whitaker, then Lynn County Sheriff, registered a dark gray Ford F-100, plate 4L2137, purchased in 1972 from a Cedar Rapids Ford dealership. The record noted, sold in 1984, no buyer details retained. Rourke stared at the printout, voice low. The truck he drove when the case happened. To confirm further, Mathers tested DNA on the silver chain. Faint fingerprints and old epithelial cells were found. Initial results showed 2 DNA profiles. One matched Anna Klein's, from a hairbrush kept by her family for nearly 50 years. The other, unidentified, bore Y chromosome markers, male. If we can match it to someone specific, Mathers said, we'll know who last touched this chain. Clara Doyle was allowed in the lab when preliminary results were announced. Through the soundproof glass, she took meticulous notes, eyes alight as the screen displayed. Material match Ford F-100. She knew she was witnessing the first piece, linking physical evidence to the man who once held power over the case. That evening, Rourke brought the report to the cold case unit office. He sat, placing the results beside two photos, one of the 1975 Pinto, another of the F-100, from registration records. Both vehicles had matching scratches on the right side. He penciled a note in red, possible collision or tow. A thought struck: if Whitaker used his truck to tow the Pinto from the original scene, the gray fabric could have caught on the chain from the seat or door when he leaned into the cabin or hooked the tow cable. The next morning, he called Clara. "We have something he can't deny," she replied, excited but cautious. "Will you go public?" "Not yet," Rourke said. "We need DNA confirmation, and we need to know where that F-100 is now." A secondary team was sent to trace the 1984 truck sale. They found it was bought by a man in Dubuque, then sold to Illinois, and lost from there. However, in the old Ford dealership's archive, they found a 1973 internal ad photo, Whitaker standing by his dark gray F-100, smiling, shaking the dealer's hand. The truck's back seat clearly showed gunmetal gray felt upholstery. That afternoon, the second DNA result returned. The male cells on the silver chain matched Whitaker's medical profile from a 1982 state employee record. Error margin, 0.3%. Mathers placed the printout before Rourke, saying simply, "It's him." The news was kept internal. A preliminary report went to the Iowa Attorney General's office, concluding, evidence C3 confirms Harold Whitaker's DNA and material matching the Ford F-100 truck seat, 1972 model. This evidence was removed from the original file and rediscovered in 2023. Rourke sat silently, long after signing the report. He looked out the window. Light snow fell, gray light reflecting on the metal desk. After nearly half a century, the silver chain, the only item once touching a girl who vanished in winter, finally spoke. Its voice, cold and low, echoed clearly, Harold Whitaker. When the Evidence C3 report reached the Iowa Attorney General's office, James Rourke knew they'd entered a new phase. Every detail in the old file now needed scrutiny under modern data's light. Physical evidence pointed to Whitaker, but he wanted more. A clear timeline proving the man wasn't just involved, but present when Anna Klein disappeared. In the cold case unit's Des Moines meeting room, Rourke stood before a whiteboard covered with old maps, scene photos, and newly retrieved 1975 radio logs from federal archives. "If we prove Whitaker left the station before the missing report," he said, "his accidental discovery theory collapses." The radio log was a long digitized telex printout. Lines of old typewriter text appeared on screen. Time, patrol unit, frequency code, brief content. For December 13, 1975, entries began at 5:45. The first Whitaker-related line was at 5:58 a.m. Unit 3A, ATT. H. Whitaker, departing station for routine patrol, direction Mount Vernon. The Klein family's missing report was logged at 7:42 a.m. Whitaker left the station at least 1 hour and 44 minutes before anyone knew of the disappearance. Clara Doyle, seated nearby, reread the log, voice soft. "He left before Frank Klein called. Where was he going at 6 in the morning?" No one answered. Rourke flipped to the next page. At 6:27 a.m. Unit 3A to dispatch, checking vehicle near HWY 30, close to Mount Vernon Bridge. Possible accident. A large gap followed, over 2 hours without signals. The next entry, at 8:43 a.m., Unit 3A on scene, requesting tow service. No injuries visible. Rourke circled the 3 lines in red. 2 hours and 35 minutes, he said slowly. between finding the car and requesting a tow. Where was he, what was he doing, and why no dispatch report? A forensic tech opened a laptop, displaying a digital map of the route from the Lynn County Sheriff's Office to the Mount Vernon Bridge. The 17-mile drive took about 25 minutes. If he left at 5:58, the tech said, Whitaker reached the bridge around 6:25, matching the checking vehicle log. Rourke nodded. So we have his location. Now they needed to prove Whitaker was there. The 1975 duty roster listed Norman Peak, a 25-year-old road maintenance worker clearing snow on Highway 30 that morning. When Rourke found him, now in his 70s, Peak still lived in Mount Vernon. He agreed to meet at a small highway diner, thick with cigarette smoke and coffee. Peak vividly recalled that morning. I was clearing snow near the bridge's curve. It was still dim. Sun, not up. A gray truck stopped about 100 meters away. Old cab, probably an early F-100. A man in a police coat got out, walked around, then got back in. I remember, because he parked where no one stops in a storm, with no accident. When Rourke showed a 1976 photo of Whitaker, Peak studied it and nodded, yeah, that's him. I recognized the walk and hat. His testimony was logged on the spot. Peak's voice low, slow, but certain. As he signed, Rourke knew they had the timeline's critical piece. Whitaker and his gray F-100 were at the bridge at least 2 hours before the missing report. The next day, Clara visited the cold case unit to see the reconstruction. On the board, Rourke had drawn a timeline, 5:58 a.m. Whitaker leaves station, 6:27 a.m. Reports, vehicle near HWY. 30, 6:30, 8:30 a.m. No contact, no signals. 7:42 a.m. Klein family reports missing. 8:43 a.m. Whitaker reports seen. 9:12 a.m. Pinto's clock stops. This 2.5-hour gap, Rourke said, is where the truth was hidden. He found the car, handled it, then staged the scene elsewhere. By the time the search team arrived, the car was already placed. Clara studied the old map. Red lines zigzagging along Highway 30, from the south ditch to the north bridge, a mile apart, matching the location discrepancy in the files. She whispered, he moved the car. Rourke nodded, eyes sharp, and maybe alone. His truck had a tow hitch. The F-100 seat fabric caught on Anna's chain when he leaned into the cabin. It all fits. For final confirmation, Rourke requested 1975 tow logs from a local service company. Old paper records were stored in Mount Vernon City Archive. After 3 days, a tech found a faded service ticket, dated December 13, 1975, with no client name, just a handwritten note. Pickup gray truck assisted with towing Pinto. At the bottom, a scrawled signature, illegible but starting with W. The ticket was copied and sent to the state. The cold case unit summary concluded, suspect Harold Whitaker's timeline and location align with all scene evidence. He left the station before the missing report, was seen with his F-100 at the Mount Vernon Bridge, and reappeared after the victim's car was moved. That evening, alone in his office, Rourke stared at the timeline on the wall. The times, 5:58, 6:27, 8:43 on December 13, 1975, were like scattered heartbeats of a story sliced apart. He murmured, not an accident, not a disappearance. It was planned. Outside, snow fell lightly on Des Moines roads, reflecting warm yellow streetlights. In the cold office, on the whiteboard, the timeline formed a single red line, pointing straight to one name. Harold Whitaker. Iowa's State Forensic Lab worked through the night. Technicians took shifts, centrifuges and freezers humming constantly. Everyone knew that if the silver chain's DNA matched Harold Whitaker, they'd have the first undeniable evidence in nearly half a century, a piece confirming the man who led Lynn County's law enforcement had manipulated it. Rourke was at the lab early, coat still dusted with snow. He leaned against the glass wall, watching through the sealed door as Dr. Elaine Mathers prepared the sample. The silver chain, evidence C3, was isolated in a sterile chamber. A small section from the clasp's inner side was scraped into a vial, mixed with an enzyme solution to extract old epithelial cells. Every step was recorded. As the PCR machine started, its green light blinked, signaling DNA amplification. "How long?" Rourke asked, voice hoarse. Mathers replied, eyes fixed on the screen. 12 hours. The sample's weak. But we can cross-check with the state personnel database. Whitaker had a blood test in 1979 for his civil service file. It's stored. She looked up, eyes bright. If it matches, we'll know. While waiting, Clara Doyle arrived with her recorder. She observed silently, flipping through old photos, the gray F-100, the microfilm of Whitaker, the tau, no log filed. Note. The scattered details now formed a logical chain, but they still needed the critical proof, DNA. At dawn, with the lab quiet except for the machine's steady hum, Mathers got the completion signal. The chain's DNA was loaded into analysis software, displaying a sequence of thousands of characters. She entered Whitaker's file code, Whitaker, Harold, Personnel Blood, 1979, for comparison. The software ran for minutes, matching points, aligning on a graph. The similarity rate appeared, 99.7%. Mathers held her breath, double-checked, then turned to Rourke. No mistake. The DNA on the chain is his. The room went still. Rourke stepped to the screen, staring at the number he'd hoped for, but hadn't dared believe. He whispered, 35 years of hiding, and one cell still tells the truth. Mathers printed the result, signed it, and sealed it in a file. That morning, Rourke called an urgent meeting with investigators. He presented the DNA results, then laid out all evidence. The silver chain, the F-100 seat fabric, radio logs, Norman Peake's testimony. It all aligns, he said. Evidence shows Whitaker was at the scene. Materials prove his truck was used. DNA confirms he touched Anna Klein's belongings. A young investigator asked, but when did he touch the chain? Before or after she disappeared? Rourke looked at him, voice firm. No one can explain why Whitaker's DNA is on the victim's personal item, unless he was the last to touch her. Clara, in the corner, wrote furiously. She stayed quiet, listening, but pictured the scene. A blizzard, the Ford Pinto tilted, and a man in a sheriff's uniform staring down. She recalled the microfilm photo, Whitaker, arms crossed, face half hidden. Now she knew why he was there so early. That afternoon, Rourke contacted the Attorney General's office for an evidence preservation order. A closed meeting was held in Des Moines, with court representatives, Mathers, and the state's chief counsel. Mathers detailed the analysis process, from DNA extraction to final results. No one objected. When she projected the comparison graph, the curves aligned like harmonized music. A court rep asked, "Any chance of error or contamination?" Mathers replied, "None. Whitaker's DNA has unique Y chromosome markers, fully matching the chain sample. Error, under 0.3%. Not a coincidence." The meeting ended with a formal report printed, titled, Iowa State Crime Lab, DNA Analysis Report Result. Positive match. Whitaker, Harold Rourke, signed the bottom, adding a brief note, recommend elevation to homicide investigation. The news stayed internal, but among state investigators, Whitaker's name surfaced in hushed talks. An old officer told Rourke over the phone, "I worked under him. I trusted him until this report." "What do you think, Jim? Did he kill her?" Rourke replied, voice slow and low. "I think she knew something, and he chose the simplest way to silence her." That evening, back in his office, Rourke saw Clara by the window, watching snowfall. "I sent a draft to the paper," she said. "Not published yet, but I had to write it now. Afraid someone might erase this again." Rourke nodded slightly. "Not this time, DNA doesn't lie." In the quiet room, Rourke opened the file, placing the 1975 Whitaker photo beside the DNA result. Two images, a man in a blizzard and a genetic code on paper, pointed to one person. Outside, night fell over Des Moines, wind whistling through the glass like an echo from the past. You can erase signatures, cut files, but not your own blood's trace. The next day, Rourke sent a formal summons to federal court. In the reason field, he wrote 4 words, DNA match confirmed. From that moment, Anna Klein's disappearance was no longer a cold case, it was a homicide. With the DNA match confirmed, James Rourke knew they'd crossed a point of no return. Though Whitaker had been retired nearly 4 decades, he remained a Lynn County icon, honored at memorials, lauded in speeches for community service. Investigating an 83-year-old former sheriff meant challenging a system that once protected him. But the evidence wasn't suspicion, it was truth in blood, cells, and DNA no one could deny. In March 2023, a covert oversight team was formed. 5 members, Rourke, a federal agent coordinator, and 3 local officers, went to Marion, where Whitaker lived with his wife in a small house at the end of Cedar Ridge Street, less than 10 miles from Cedar Rapids. From outside, the house looked ordinary brown shingle roof. A small angel statue in the front yard, a dark green door. A wooden sign read, Whitaker Home, since 1974. One early morning, as frost still clung to the grass, Whitaker stepped outside, his posture slow but upright. He wore a thick coat, holding a folded gazette, and walked leisurely to the small coffee shop at the street's corner. Rourke sat in a black car with tinted windows, observing through binoculars. Right on schedule, he said, into the mic. The surveillance team had tracked him for 3 days, noting every move. Whitaker lived predictably, almost ritually, reading the paper, visiting Henderson's diner each morning, drinking a black coffee, speaking to no one, and returning home before 9. The plan to collect a DNA sample was meticulously prepared. Per regulations, for evidence to be legally admissible, it had to be collected in a public setting without violating privacy. On a Thursday morning, Rourke personally oversaw the operation. At Henderson's, Whitaker's usual corner table by the window was targeted. The waiter had been briefed to preserve the coffee cup after Whitaker left. At 8:12 a.m., Whitaker entered the diner. He ordered, as always, black coffee, no sugar. His voice was low, raspy but clear. He sat, read the paper, occasionally glancing out the window. From the car across the street, Rourke tracked every gesture. 18 minutes later, Whitaker stood, folded the paper, left some change and a half-empty cup, and exited. As the diner door closed behind him, the waiter promptly collected the cup, placed it in a time-stamped evidence bag, and handed it to an officer waiting out back. The cup was rushed to the Des Moines lab, under Mather's supervision. She scraped the rim, collecting epithelial cells. After less than 6 hours, the results came in, a 100% match with the DNA on Anna Klein's silver chain. Mathers sent Rourke a brief report with 4 words, match confirmed again. Rourke read the message on his phone, feeling as if ice were slowly melting inside him. He printed the results, placing them beside the prior DNA analysis. The 2 graphs aligned perfectly, each peak matching like they were cut from the same mold. No room for doubt remained. They now had direct physical evidence from the living suspect. Undeniable, no technical error, excuse possible. That afternoon, Rourke held an internal meeting. "We have his DNA, matching the scene's evidence," he said, voice firm and cold. "Next, we track his statement, verify motive, and prepare an arrest warrant. But first, I want to know, does Whitaker realize we're closing in?" Surveillance reports showed no change in his behavior. He still shopped with his wife, visited the same diner, drove a 2005 silver sedan slowly and carefully. No signs of suspicion or being followed. In the investigation log, Rourke wrote a brief note. "He's lived too long with this secret, long enough to think no one remembers." Clara was informed of the results that day. She stayed silent for a long time before speaking. "He once ran the entire sheriff's office. For years, he gave speeches about justice, honor, while a girl's chain bore his DNA." Her voice broke. "What chills me most is he still drinks coffee in the same town, driving past roads where they searched for her." Rourke nodded, weary. Guilty men trust time. But time doesn't erase DNA. 2 days later, the forensic report was submitted to the Iowa Attorney General's office, with a bolded conclusion, DNA sample from evidence fully matches sample indirectly collected from suspect Harold Whitaker. Probability of random match, 1 in 340 million. With that line, Anna Klein's disappearance officially became a homicide investigation, first-degree murder. That night, Rourke drove alone to Marion. He parked 2 blocks from Whitaker's house, peering through the car window. In the yellow porch light, Whitaker sat on a wooden chair, reading the paper, his face calm. No one in the neighborhood knew that. In police hands, DNA strands from that man were retelling a story from a snowy morning in 1975. When he left the station early, stood in the snow, and hid a crime he believed buried forever. Rourke sat in the dark, listening to the wind hit the car, saying softly to himself, "No turning back, Harold. This morning's coffee was your confession." At 5 a.m. on August 12, 2023, the sky was still pitch black. Low clouds wrapping Marion's outskirts, like winter's breath trapped in August. On the small street to Cedar Ridge, 4 unmarked cars quietly stopped. Doors opened almost simultaneously, figures in bulletproof vests stepping out, moving silently. No sirens, no megaphones. This wasn't a routine arrest. They were taking away a former system icon. James Rourke stood behind the front line, black coat collar up. He checked his watch. 5:29. "It's time," he said quietly, into the mic. "Proceed." 2 officers approached Whitaker's porch, knocking firmly 3 times. No response. An officer called out, "Iowa State Police! Open the door, we have a search and arrest warrant." Less than 10 seconds later, a light flicked on inside. A man's silhouette appeared behind the curtain. The door cracked open. Whitaker stood there, white hair disheveled, in striped pajamas, eyes squinting against the flashlights. "What's this about?" he asked, voice raspy but calm. Rourke stepped forward, presenting the warrant. "Harold Whitaker, you're under arrest for first-degree murder in the 1975 Anna Klein case, along with charges of concealment and evidence tampering." The morning wind made the paper's edge flutter. Whitaker stood still for a second, then shook his head slightly. "Murder, after nearly half a century? You're digging up old snow?" An officer cuffed him, reading Miranda rights. At the line, "You have the right to remain silent," he gave a faint smile. "Trust me, that's what I'm best at." They led him to the car. The house door slammed shut, the porch light fading. His wife, Eleanor, stood on the steps, clutching a knit scarf, hands trembling, speechless. Rourke nodded lightly, signaling the team to move. Silently, the convoy rolled out of the neighborhood toward the state headquarters in Des Moines. That morning, the media hadn't yet caught wind. At the cold case unit office, Clara Doyle was present when the suspect's car arrived. Through the glass, she saw Whitaker step out, posture still upright, eyes not panicked, only carrying the weary arrogance of someone who knew the game was ending but believed he could control the final move. As he was led to interrogation, Rourke sat across from him. The ceiling's white light reflected off the glass, casting a faint halo around his head. "You know why you're here," Rourke said. "Voice even. We have your DNA on the victim's evidence, proof you left the station early, a witness who saw your truck near the scene. It's time to tell the truth." Whitaker leaned back, cuffed hands on the table, aged nails lightly scraping the surface. "The truth?" He gave a faint laugh. "The truth is she skidded. I just cleared the snow." The room fell silent. Rourke didn't blink. "Where did she skid?" "Near the bridge. I saw the car, saw the snow packed. She was lying there. I tried to pull her out. She wasn't breathing, and you reported nothing to anyone." Whitaker looked up, a flash of anger in his eyes. "Do you know how that storm was? Radio signals died. Roads blocked. I thought no one could get through. But the radio log shows you called dispatch at 6:27, saying you were checking an abandoned vehicle. 2 hours later, you reported the tow. Where were you in those 2 hours, Mr. Whitaker?" The old man went silent. A vein pulsed faintly at his temple. He licked his lips, voice raspy. I told you, I cleared snow. I pulled the car off the road. Alone? Yes. With your F-100? Maybe. Rourke leaned forward, voice low. Icy. Fabric from your F-100 seat was on her chain. Your DNA on its clasp. You call that clearing snow? Whitaker didn't answer, staring at the two-way mirror as if addressing someone beyond the room. For a moment, he smiled, a faint, misty smile. You wouldn't understand, he said softly. The snow was thick then. Everything looked like an accident. I did what was needed to keep the town calm. She wasn't worth the chaos. Rourke stared long, his eyes a mix of anger and contempt. You call hiding a life keeping calm? He stood, closing the file. I think the town will finally know what you kept in that snow for 48 years. The statement was fully recorded. As Whitaker left, he turned back with a final remark. You think you've solved it, but you've only stirred up things better left alone. Iowa doesn't need old ghosts. By 9 a.m., the arrest was officially announced. The Des Moines Register and major outlets reported, former Lynn County Sheriff, arrested in 1975, missing case, cold case solved after 48 years. The local community was stunned. The man once praised for virtue and discipline was now cuffed, led through police halls. The image aired on every evening broadcast. A reporter asked as he was escorted, "Any comment on the missing girl, Mr. Whitaker?" He paused, looking straight into the camera, eyes cloudy but proud. "I didn't kill anyone, I just cleared snow." That line, replayed dozens of times on TV, became a symbol of a desperate denial. But in labs, radio logs, witness testimonies, and the cold DNA strand, the truth was rewritten. Snow could hide footprints, but not the hands that touched a death. On Tuesday morning, 3 days after Whitaker's arrest, an expanded search warrant was signed by the Iowa State Court. Target: the backyard of the Marion wooden house where he'd lived for over 40 years. When police arrived, thick fog blanketed the trees, grass soaked from overnight rain. Eleanor stood on the porch, wrapped tightly in a shawl, eyes vacant. She said nothing, as forensics vans parked, only nodding faintly when an officer showed the warrant. "We'll keep everything intact, ma'am," the investigator said softly. She replied in a tired murmur. "Do what you must. I've lived with silence too long." The excavation team, 6 strong, was overseen by Rourke and Dr. Elaine Mathers. They set up a white tent in the backyard, where grass grew patchy and an old maple tree stood, its roots twisted like ancient ropes. Per house records, the area was once a bare lot. Whitaker concreted in 1980, the year he was promoted, and withdrew from local investigations. A forensic tech pried up paving stones, chipping away concrete. At the second layer, a metal detector pinged. Mathers paused. Something's down there. As soil was cleared, they found a decayed canvas bag containing grayish objects. Rourke, gloved, touched it lightly. "Bones," he said quietly. All sounds hushed. The team worked meticulously, each shovel stroke careful. Beneath the bag were small, scattered bones, coated in dark, damp earth. Nearby were long brown hair strands, matted, and a rusted metal button engraved faintly with H&MCO. A common 1970s clothing brand. Mathers ordered a temporary preservation zone. Each bone fragment was sealed in sterile nylon bags, numbered sequentially. Forensics identified a pelvis, arm bones, and a small skull fragment, enough for DNA and dental identification. Digging deeper, they found odd items: glass shards, a pencil tip, and a thin broken metal ring. Rourke shook his head slightly. He buried everything, not just bones. By afternoon, the backyard was a crime scene. Yellow reflective tape encircled it. Portable lights blazed. Neighbors watched from afar, many shaking their heads in disbelief. A woman whispered, "He mowed that lawn every week, right over that spot." News spread fast. When Clara Doyle arrived, she stood at the perimeter, notebook in hand. Rourke approached, face smudged with mud. "We found bones," he said. She swallowed hard, asking, "Is it her?" Rourke glanced at the pit. "Let the DNA speak." The bones and hair were rushed to the state lab. Mathers personally oversaw testing. She extracted marrow from the pelvis, isolating nuclear DNA, and cross-checked Anna Klein's dental records from her family. Despite nearly half a century, the upper jaw's teeth retained a distinctive shape, a misaligned wisdom tooth matching a 1974 X-ray perfectly. When DNA results appeared, the match was 99.98%. Mathers sat silently, then exhaled, voice soft. "It's her." That evening, Rourke got the news. He stood before the caseboard, staring at Anna Klein's enlarged photo from Clara, a brown-haired girl with a shy smile. He whispered, as if to the image. "We found you, Anna." The next morning, a press release went out. Hundreds of reporters flocked to Marion, lining the small street where Whitaker's house was sealed off. Eleanor was escorted out, passing the crowd silently. Her face like someone who'd lost her entire past. A reporter asked, "Did you know anything?" She paused, staring distantly. "I only knew he always said, 'Don't dig up old things.' Now I understand what he meant." At the press conference, Rourke spoke briefly. "We recovered physical evidence at suspect Harold Whitaker's residence. DNA and dental analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Anna Klein, missing since 1975. This is undeniable proof." Asked how he felt after 48 years of the case being forgotten, Rourke replied, "I think of one thing, she's finally back with her name." That night, Clara drafted the next forgotten Iowa installment. She described the moment the team found the first bone, lights hitting the dark soil, officers' breaths heavy. She wrote, "He lived over his crime's grave for nearly half a century. Each time he mowed, he cut over the earth hiding her. Each winter snow fell, he saw it whiter there than anywhere else. Perhaps, deep down, he knew that snow wasn't just snow." In Iowa State Jail, upon hearing of the excavation, Whitaker slowly raised his head. "What did they find?" he asked the guard. When told, "Bones. DNA matched. It's the girl," he went silent, then said softly, "I knew they'd dig it up eventually." Iowa never let snow rest. That night, wind swept through Marion, carrying the damp smell of freshly turned earth. The backyard was covered with a white tarp, but under the police van's yellow lights, the wet ground seemed to breathe. For the first time in 48 years, that patch of earth spoke. 2 weeks after the excavation results were announced, the cold case unit entered what Rourke called the final dark piece, finding why Harold Whitaker killed Anna Klein. Physical evidence was complete, timelines and locations aligned, but no one in the team could grasp what drove a sheriff in the winter of 1975 to kill a 19-year-old student. Clara Doyle, still closely following the case, was the first to raise the question. She visited the University of Iowa, where Anna studied. The old student archive held overlooked records, scholarship applications, internship reports, evaluations from state agencies hosting summer interns. In a dusty wooden cabinet on the 3rd floor, Clara found a file coded #I2175/KLIN-NA. The first line stopped her, internship agency, Lynn County Sheriff's Office. Per the file, Anna joined an 8-week community engagement internship from June to August 1975. Direct supervisor, Sheriff Harold Whitaker. In the final evaluation, a handwritten note in black ink read, "Serious, diligent student, but tends to ask too many questions about internal procedures." Clara brought the copy to Rourke. He read it, stunned. "She worked for him," he said slowly. "Right in the building we're investigating." He ordered a pull of Whitaker's 1975 personnel records, focusing on internal complaints. 3 days later, the legal team delivered a yellowed, musty file, nearly 300 pages thick. Mid-routine shift reports and budget approvals, Rourke found a disciplinary memo dated August 20, 1975, 4 months before Anna's disappearance. The memo was brief. Received verbal complaint of inappropriate conduct by Sheriff Whitaker toward a female intern. No clear evidence. Matter shelved. No complainant was named. Only a typed anonymous source. In the right corner, someone penciled, "Klein." Rourke gripped the paper, creases digging into his hand. He was accused, and the accuser might have been Anna. Clara, across from him, spoke low. If she planned to go public, or even just tell someone, Rourke cut in, he had a reason to silence her for good. To verify, they tracked down 1975 office staff. Only one was still alive. Evelyn Crane, 87. An administrative clerk from 1970-1980. At her Cedar Falls nursing home, she clearly recalled the name. Anna, such a polite girl, she said, voice shaky but clear. I remember her bringing coffee for everyone. Whitaker always asked more of her than others. She paused, eyes distant. Once, I heard them arguing in his office. Door closed, but I caught her saying, I'll tell the dean if you keep this up. After that, she quit the internship a week early. I think he told her to go. Rourke and Clara exchanged glances. The story fit everything. After leaving the internship, Anna returned to school, and by December, she was gone. In a 1975 internal report, Whitaker had requested the Personnel Board delete internship records as unnecessary for long-term operations. Indeed, those records were gone from the sheriff's archive, surviving only in the university's copy Clara found. This confirmed Whitaker deliberately erased ties to the student. Rourke presented the finding to the Attorney General. A legal team was formed to review Whitaker's entire tenure. They uncovered 2 other complaints from 1973, 1978 by female clerical staff, both handled internally. None pursued further. That evening, reading the report, Rourke called Clara. We know why, he said. Anna knew he wasn't just administratively out of line. She threatened to report him. Instead of fearing for his job, he chose to end it all. Clara was silent for a long moment. She probably thought she was just threatening. A 19-year-old girl, believing truth could change adults. She didn't know that sometimes truth makes them willing to kill to hide it. At the same time, in Iowa's state jail interrogation room, Whitaker was informed of the new findings. He looked up, eyes cloudy, voice raspy. Intern, oh, that girl. I remember her, smart, but too curious. The investigator asked, did she accuse you? He gave a faint, dry smile. Accuse me? Nobody would have believed her. Back then, who'd take a girl's word against a sheriff? Rourke read the recorded statement, lips tight. It wasn't a confession, but enough to show Whitaker didn't deny the connection or show remorse. He wrote in the final report, Harold Whitaker's motive for murder likely stemmed from fear of exposure and accusation by intern Anna Klein. When she left, he tracked her down, stopped her, and in that confrontation, caused her death. He staged the scene to make it a disappearance. The next day, Rourke visited Frank Klein, Anna's father, now in his 80s, at a Lisbon nursing home. He handed him a report copy. The old man sat silently for a long time, then asked in a hoarse voice, why did he do it? Rourke answered honestly, because she did the right thing. Frank nodded, eyes misting in the light. My girl always believed justice would win, he said, and now it has, even if late. Outside the window, Iowa's sky was foggy. In the records room, fresh pages were clipped into file 75 Nusa 431, reopened case. The final line on the conclusion page was bolded. Motivation established, obstruction of exposure, fear of accusation. After nearly half a century, the secret buried in Iowa's coldest snow finally melted, revealing the true face of a man once hailed as an icon of integrity. Harold Whitaker killed not out of anger, but fear, and that fear forced him to live the rest of his life in the shadow of a crime snow could never fully cover. The second-floor interrogation room at Iowa's state jail was meticulously prepared that morning. A cold metal table, 2 facing chairs, and a corner-mounted camera with a faint red light. No press, no lawyers. Just James Rourke, a prosecutor's representative, and an 83-year-old man, Harold Whitaker, former Lynn County Sheriff, who'd kept silent like stone for 48 years. Whitaker entered, hands lightly cuffed at his waist. He wore a gray sweater, white hair mussed, face etched with deep wrinkles. He didn't look around, sitting slowly, placing his hands before him. Rourke opened the file, the table reflecting cold light. "This interrogation is recorded and officially archived," he said, voice steady. "You have the right to remain silent, but your statements may be used in court. Understood?" Whitaker nodded, slightly lifting his face. "I understand. I've read enough Mirandas to others in my life," he said, voice dry and faintly mocking. Rourke looked directly at him. "Then tell it your way. On the night of December 11th, 1975, where did you meet Anna Klein?" A long silence followed. Whitaker inhaled deeply, giving a faint laugh. "I didn't meet her that night. I met her that afternoon, before the snow fell." The camera captured every movement. His voice was steady, unshaken, but his eyes dimmed, like someone opening a long locked door. "She called me, said she wanted to talk. I knew she was upset. Months earlier, the internship had riled her up. I was just teasing, maybe too much. I didn't think she'd plan to report me." Rourke didn't interrupt. He let Whitaker continue. "She asked to meet me near the empty lot behind the Mount Vernon Bridge. Quiet place, hardly anyone passes by. I drove up in the F-100. She was standing there wearing a green coat, hair blowing in the wind, face red from the cold. She said straight out she'd write to the dean and state police. Said I'd abused my authority." Whitaker paused, hands clenching. "I told her to think it over. I said it would ruin my reputation, the whole department's. But she wouldn't listen." Rourke lowered his voice. "Then what happened?" Whitaker looked straight into the camera. "We argued. I grabbed her arm, tried to stop her from leaving. She pulled back, slipped, fell into the snowy ditch. She hit her head on a rock." He stopped, sighed, voice dropping. "I thought she was just knocked out. But when I pulled her up, blood was flowing. I panicked. I knew if I called an ambulance, it'd be over for me." Rourke nodded, voice hardening. "And you chose to cover it up." Whitaker closed his eyes, then opened them slowly. "I wrapped her in a tarp from the truck, put her in the back. I thought I'd bury her somewhere temporarily, then report an accident. But when I returned, her Pinto was still parked on the road. I couldn't let anyone see both cars there, so I hooked a tow cable from my truck to hers and dragged it to the north ditch. I gave it a slight push to slide into the snow. The headlights were still on. I remember clearly, as the snow fell, that light faded, like everything was buried." Rourke flipped a page in the file. "So why did you bury her in your backyard?" Whitaker gave a dry, eerie laugh. "I brought the body home that night. No one noticed. Roads were empty, storm rolling in. I had authority to access the scene. I hid her in the garage for a few days, waiting for the snow to melt. When it warmed up, I dug a hole in the backyard, told my wife I was gardening, planting a maple. She didn't ask. No one did. In Iowa, people trust calm." Rourke bowed his head, gripping his pen. "And the evidence? The chain, glove, coffee receipt?" "She dropped them when she fell," Whitaker replied. "I kept the chain, put it in my coat pocket. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to throw it away. Later, cleaning the scene, I forgot about it. I must have touched it while wearing gloves, left DNA. I didn't think it'd survive nearly half a century." The room sank into silence. Rourke asked, "Why didn't you confess sooner?" Whitaker looked up at the ceiling. The light reflected a dull glint in his eyes. "Because I thought time would erase it, and it partly did. No one mentioned her anymore. I got promoted, retired, received medals. I lived my life like it never happened. But every winter, when snow fell, I saw those tire tracks on the road. I knew they were still there. I knew snow couldn't hide everything." Rourke paused, then said, "Any message you want to leave?" Whitaker gave a faint laugh, voice raspy. "No, I'm not sorry. I just want her to understand. I didn't mean to kill. I just wanted calm, but sometimes, silence is the crime." The camera kept rolling. He sat motionless, eyes on the table, hands trembling slightly. Rourke signed to end the recording. As an officer let him out, Whitaker stood, slow as if carrying 48 years of guilt. Before crossing the door, he turned back, whispering, "If I'd let the snow cover it that day, maybe no one would have found her. But you're different, Rourke. You dug it up." The interrogation ended at 11:17 a.m. In the final log, Rourke wrote one line: suspect Harold Whitaker admitted contact with the victim, an argument leading to death, followed by concealment and scene staging. Confession aligns with physical evidence. Outside, light snow fell on the jail lot, dusting the tin roof. In the cold room, the camera shut off, leaving only the creak of a fan and pale white light on the empty chair where the old man had sat. After nearly half a century, the truth was finally spoken, not by the wind, but by the hoarse voice of a man who thought snow would keep silent forever. In February 2024, Des Moines was blanketed in thick, blinding snow. Streetlights cast faint yellow glows on the quiet streets. Inside Federal Courthouse District 4, State of Iowa versus Harold Whitaker began, nearly half a century after Anna Klein vanished. The large courtroom, with high ceilings and rows of wooden seats, held Frank Klein, Anna's father, now over 80, sitting silently in the front row, clutching a small framed photo of his daughter. Beside him was Clara Doyle, the reporter who helped bring the case back to light. Whitaker entered through a side door, wearing a gray suit prepared by his defense attorney. No longer the community icon who spoke at annual memorials, he was a defendant, an 83-year-old man, stooped, face cold, but eyes still carrying the uneasy confidence of someone who once held power. As the court clerk read the charges, he looked straight ahead, unblinking. Harold Whitaker, charged with first-degree murder, evidence tampering and obstruction of justice in the disappearance of Anna Klein, December 1975. The gavel struck 3 times, opening what the media called Iowa's tardiest criminal trial. During the prosecution, Rourke addressed the jury for 2 days. Not just an investigator, he was a key witness to the case's revival. A large screen displayed images, the 1975 microfilm of Whitaker, standing in snow, arms crossed before the Ford Pinto. This photo, Rourke said, voice echoing, was taken before the police received the missing report. It proves the defendant was at the scene, knew the car's location, before the search even began. Next came the interrogation video. Whitaker's confession played in excerpts. His hoarse, steady voice admitted arguing with Anna, her falling in the snow, and hiding the body, staging the scene. The courtroom was silent as his final words echoed, "I just wanted calm, but sometimes, silence is the crime." Rourke presented scientific evidence, a 99.7% DNA match between Whitaker and the silver chain. Indirect DNA from the Marion coffee cup. Fabric from the Ford F-100 seat matching scene evidence. On screen, each graph and trace was magnified. No longer guesses or memories, this was undeniable data. A technician testified, presenting the original December 13, 1975 radio log, proving Whitaker left the station nearly 2 hours before Frank Klein's missing report. That time gap, the prosecutor concluded, is when he killed and staged the scene. The first witness, Norman Peake, the 1975 snow clearer, spoke shakily but firmly. "I saw a gray truck and a man in a police coat by the Mount Vernon Bridge. No mistake, it was him." When Rourke showed Whitaker's 1975 photo, Peake pointed, "That's the guy." The second witness, Evelyn Crane, former Lynn County Sheriff's clerk, confirmed hearing Anna and Whitaker argue. She said she'd report him. "I remember that." A week later, she quit. Her words hushed the courtroom. Then Dr. Elaine Mathers, head of DNA analysis, explained the testing process, displaying comparison charts between Whitaker's 1979 sample and evidence C3. Asked the odds of a random match, she replied firmly, 1 in 340 million. In other words, impossible to mistake. Whitaker's lawyer, Paul Marin, a middle-aged man, tried to salvage the case. He argued the death was accidental, that the defendant acted in panic, and the confession showed remorse, not intent to kill. But the evidence was overwhelming. During cross-examination, Marin asked Whitaker, "Did you try to save her?" "No," Whitaker replied. "Did you report it?" "No." "Why?" "Because I was scared." The answer sparked murmurs in the courtroom. A woman in the audience sobbed. Rourke stayed silent, looking at the file. Anna Klein's name bolded on the cover. The trial lasted 11 days. As the jury retired to deliberate, Frank Klein clutched his daughter's photo, his aged eyes bright in that moment. After 3 hours, the jury room door opened. The foreperson stood, reading aloud. The Iowa jury, after reviewing all evidence, finds the defendant Harold Whitaker guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, obstruction of justice, and evidence tampering. The murmurs stopped. Rourke looked up, face expressionless. Whitaker sat still, eyes closed, hands gripping the chair, lips moving as if speaking to himself. The judge pronounced life imprisonment without parole at Iowa State Penitentiary for first-degree murder. Whitaker nodded faintly, no reaction. Reporters were allowed in for the final moments. A camera caught Frank Klein standing, tears rolling down his weathered face, trembling hands raising his daughter's photo. Clara, behind him, bowed her head. After nearly half a century, justice had a name, a face, and a written verdict. As the prison van left the courthouse, Des Moines snow fell again. Flakes drifted silently onto wet pavement. Whitaker looked through the van's small window, his face faintly reflected. He said nothing, watching the city's dim lights fade behind. In the cold case unit office, Rourke filed case hash 750431. Klein, Anna back in its drawer, closing it. He wrote on a new label, resolved, conviction achieved, February 2024. On his desk, Clara left a note. Justice doesn't die. It just sleeps long in the snow. Outside, the afternoon passed slowly. Des Moines residents went home, still discussing the trial. Some called Whitaker pitiful, others deserving. But for Frank Klein, there was only one feeling, peace. Asked by a reporter what he thought after the verdict, he said slowly, "My girl was found." And finally Iowa spoke what the snow kept silent. A cold gust swept the courthouse steps, lifting snowflakes high. Somewhere, in winter's quiet air, a church bell rang faintly, blending with city sounds. In Des Moines, the city that forgot a young girl in a 1975 blizzard, the truth was finally rewritten, clear as black ink on the verdict. Guilty on all counts. The Iowa 1975 case, Anna Klein, is not just a personal tragedy, but a reflection of cracks in trust, justice, and how American society views power, especially in the hands of those meant to uphold the law. Harold Whitaker, a celebrated sheriff, a symbol of order, abused his position to conceal a crime for nearly half a century. Anna Klein, a young student who dared speak truth, was silenced by the system's quiet. But crucially, the truth was found, not by the powerful, but by ordinary people who believed in justice. Detective Rourke, reporter Clara Doyle, and Anna's father Frank Klein, who never stopped sending letters over the years. In today's America, this story reminds us no system is perfect, and justice doesn't work without those willing to defend it. When someone like Clara, a symbol of free investigative journalism, dares to ask questions and reopen files, she revives a core American democratic value: transparency and accountability. From this journey, Americans see that power shouldn't be shielded by reverence, but scrutinized by truth. The lesson for today is clear: anywhere, be it police, politics, or business, silence before wrong is the most dangerous complicity. Iowa may bury things in snow, but not the truth, and America, to keep its people's trust, cannot bury justice under the veneer of honor or power. Thank you for following this story to its end, where justice, buried under snow for nearly half a century, was finally found. Subscribe to the channel to not miss the next journeys, where we continue unearthing truths hidden by time.